Welcome back to the Interview Podcast on the Y Millbank Podcast Network. I'm Craig Weinberg, sitting in studio in Millbank, South Dakota, and in a continuation of our conversations, kind of centered around the new year, 2020, the COVID response, and how that's affected people around the country and around the world, perhaps. I'm pleased to welcome to the show a friend of mine that I met several years ago. We did some work together and have grown to be friends at some level. I call him a friend. Mark Deterding is with us. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Craig, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. I know you have a little bit of a tight schedule. You're running away from the cold north today.
Got to do it.
I guess. We'll let it slide this time.
Yeah.
You briefly kind of give us an idea of what you do as a job and your career.
Sure. So I have a company called Triune Leadership Services. And as part of that, I'm basically a servant leadership development consultant, if you will, as well as an executive coach. So that plays out in a couple different ways. One, the executive coaching is pretty self-explanatory. I work with senior leaders, wherever they're at around the country that are raising their hand and just saying, I want to have you help me accelerate my progress towards where I want to get. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they do have an interest in servant leadership, is why, they probably found me, if you will. And then the other ways that plays out is working directly with organizations and leaders in really teaching them a model that I kind of developed as I looked at Jesus as how he led, and it's a model of servant leadership. And I help people into, seeing what that looks like, how that plays out on a day-to-day activity, both at their workplace and within their personal lives as well, within their families. So I do that and work with senior leadership teams and organizations, helping them to institutionalize that culture of servant leadership. And then I also have a leadership roundtable groups that I run every year on an annual basis that basically is taking leaders from anywhere, really, from any number of companies around the country, now that we do it via Zoom, but who want to really learn about the specific model of leading Jesus' way and what that looks like. And that's basically a 7-session encounter, 2 hours a piece, where people sign on and really commit to, driving an understanding of that type of leadership.
Yeah. Now your website is triuneleadershipservices.com.
That's correct. Yep.
And you have a book out called Leading Jesus' Way. Is that correct?
That is correct. I wrote that book about it's been 5 years ago now. Really, people were wanting to say, hey, Mark, I think this message needs to be able to be transferable above and beyond just your capacity to be in front of people. And so they really pushed me to write a book. Even though I'm not an author, I never claimed to be an author, but I actually have a couple of books now. One's called A Model of Servant Leadership, and one, Leading Jesus' Way, which is the main, curriculum, if you will, of how to step into that model of servant leadership.
Give us a little backgrounder into you and your coming of your understanding into this idea. Like, what did it take for you to learn these leadership principles and to implement them, and then to figure out that I'm not the only one that needs this; other people do too. What was that journey like?
So that's a great question, Craig. I spent 35 years in the printing industry, in long-run web offset printing, and working for a couple of the largest printers in the world, actually, publicly held organizations, and just had the opportunity to lead at some pretty high levels. I got cast into some spots early on that were probably above and beyond my capability. And I knew early on I had to lean into something other than my own God-given skills and abilities. And so that was the Lord, really. I mean, I looked at some models that I'd had early on for sure, but really looked at how Jesus led and to kind of guide the way on that. And so when I decided to step out of the corporate world, I had the opportunity to lead thousands of people. I was leading, about $1 billion worth of sales
Wow.
in the organization, and the total operations for, one of those printers, the Bont Corporation at the time, and so it just really able to learn by trial and error, right? I mean, in what I thought was right, and had some mentors that I would say taught me how to not lead,
Mm-hmm.
how I didn't want to lead, and some really, really great mentors on how to lead. And another big key step in that, Craig, was at one of the stops along the way, I really engaged with Ken Blanchard and his leadership development company, which really framed up my understanding of how to be intentional about driving a specific culture that you want to drive within an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me a lot with what I do today. And Ken is just a phenomenal leader. I learned so much of him from leadership too. He wrote a book called Lead Like Jesus, and really learned a lot. And I was honored. He wrote kind of the on the an endorsement on the back cover of my book,
Hmm.
because he felt really, really good about what the content was and on leadership. So just having great mentors along the way and the opportunity to work with people, and really a heart for people. I mean, my heart has always been to help people to achieve their dreams and their goals, and to help them to really come together and understand what significant leadership looks like. And so that was fun, working up through organizations to really do it. But then, to your point, I about 10 years ago, actually in late 2010, I had some local business leaders ask me if I would be open to basically teaching servant leadership to the local senior leaders in our community. And just because I'd never really worked locally. I'm always flying all over the country, to all the areas that I had responsibility for, and never really right here locally. So they just asked me if I would be willing to invest in some local leaders at the time. And I did that. And holy cow, I just found it so rewarding. I mean, it resonated with the leaders, they found it very helpful. And I just absolutely loved it. When you get the opportunity to work with people that are raising their hand and saying, I want to become a better leader, I want to be a servant leader,
Mm-hmm.
on behalf of the people that I'm working with. Will you help me do that? I just really had a blast with that, to the point where after that first year of Leadership Roundtable, I said, yes, I do want to do this. Basically as a career. I mean, really just step out of that corporate world and just invest into leaders. And so I did that, and that's when I got my coaching certification through the International Coaching Federation and Coach University, because I knew I wanted to work with people one-on-one and be legitimate as a coach. So got that training, and just combined all those things together, and wrote a lot of curriculum, and put together just a lot of different training packages, programs, and things like that. And it's just taken off from there. And it's just been just a nonstop blessing for me to be able to have the opportunity to work with these great leaders.
Uh, Briefly, if it's possible, take the concept of leading Jesus way and what it means, and kind of give us a snapshot of just a piece. Why is it so important that Jesus is the model that you want to use in your training?
Yeah, well, the reason for that is I believe Jesus is the ultimate master servant leader. I mean, when you think about an individual who took a senior leadership team of 12 people and turned that into a following of 2.3 billion folks, there's some significant leadership going on there. And there's probably, I mean, no more influential person in the world. I mean, it doesn't matter what your faith is. You think about influential people, in the world, Jesus comes to the top of the mind. I mean, what are the two most celebrated holidays, in the world? It's, his birth and his death and resurrection.
Yeah.
So, I mean, tons of influence. And so just really looking at that and saying, okay, here's somebody that had a huge amount of success, how did he go about doing that?
Hmm.
And what did that look like? And that's why I really based it on Jesus just being that ultimate model. Because at the end of the day, I mean, if I would stand up and say this is my model, I mean, how much credence would that have? Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with a few thousand people and that type of thing, but who cares, right? In comparison to
Right.
the master.
Yeah. As you've kind of moved through this over the last few years, you've been 10 years ago, so 2010, 2011. That's kind of the beginning of this journey into coaching leadership teams around the region and the country. Uh, how different is it? Like in let's forget 2020 for a minute. We'll go there in a second. But prior to 2020, what was the feeling of the corporate world? Like, what kind of people? What did it take for them to get and say, you know what, we need to rethink some of these things. We need to do a different kind of leadership model. What did that look like across the board?
So the interesting thing about that is that anytime that you ask a group of people to describe the type of leader they like working for, or another way to put it is who's your favorite boss and what
Mm-hmm.
are their attributes, people will always 100% of the time describe servant leadership. They'll never use that term, but they will describe the things that servant leaders do.
Hmm.
The problem is when you look at the world, that is really a minority. The lion's share of the world has run for a long, long time on a positional authority, hierarchy type leadership, that's how you get things done, that's how it works. And so, so many people have come up through that that they think that's what it looks like. But when they get exposed to the possibility of, or they have the opportunity to work for a servant leader that really does care first and foremost about people and the recognition that people are what's going to drive the profitability, the success of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
And if you focus on the greater good of people, you won't have to worry about the profitability, the performance, those types of things. They get the chance to work for that, and it's like, whoa, that is really fantastic. And there's a number of uh, unfortunately it's only a few, but there are a number of great organizations that if you study them, and there's been studies done on this that they've sold out on servant leadership and the things that I like to talk about, and their performance is light years ahead of any other companies, of the S&P 500, of those 10 companies that Jim Collins talks about in his book Good to Great. I mean, it just blows away all of those. So the data will show that servant leadership is great business,
Hmm.
and it's great for people. But it's not easy. It's much harder to lead that way. Therefore, people just usually just defect, if you will, to positional authority, my way or the highway type leadership. That's where they're comfortable, and they go from there.
Why is
But
it
it's
why is it difficult in your experience for companies to rethink their model?
So it comes down to the individual, right? It's human nature says I'm going to think about myself first and foremost.
Hmm.
And so all my decisions are going to be based on, is this going to be good for me or not? And they will do anything and everything to, do whatever's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
Servant leadership says, I'm going to think about the greater good of others always, first and foremost. And so my decisions are going to be based on their greater good as opposed to my greater good. What you find out as a leader when you do that, your greater good is going to be served because you're serving the greater good of others. But it isn't, I mean, you have to step out of your own human nature that says, I'm thinking about myself. And there's not one of us that can say that, oh, well, that's an easy thing to do. I mean, I get up every morning thinking on how I can just help others
Right.
and just put myself at the side. It's just not reality.
Yeah.
And so it takes a group of people that say, we want to lock arms on this.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to really make this great for all of our people. And it's just unbelievable when a leader does get that paradigm shift, it totally changes their own personal purpose
Hmm.
around why they were, there, why they're a leader and so forth. It's all about you get enjoyment of seeing other people advance as opposed to yourself advance and that type thing. And it's just a really, really wonderful thing. And what I believe is that's significant work. It's not, maybe not seen as success. It's significant work. It's the things that people will be talking about on your last dang day, and
Mm,
how you help them get to some place where they would have never got if it wasn't for you.
yeah.
How you were there for them on on their toughest days. How you lifted them up through that. All those types of things. That's what people are going to remember, and that's why they're going to want to work for you.
The first time we met was around some, training videos that we were working on with you to get this out. But you were doing, I think it was your second round of and I could be wrong on that number, of taking that concept and translating it to the family model and how to be servant leaders in your home as a family. Was that just a natural progression from the business world that this makes a lot of sense in the structure of a family as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Craig. And here's how that came about. After I had my first year's leadership roundtable group, where we definitely focused on the business side of things. We're focused on their professional aspect as a leader. And last session, we just basically threw out this question. I said, so how's everybody doing? How do you feel that you're doing on all these concepts that we talked about through the last 7 months? And basically everybody said, actually, I'm making quite a bit of progress. It's going really, really well. But where I'm really falling short is at home. For whatever reason, I get at home and I'm a different person. All of a sudden, I'm not thinking about the greater good of my spouse. I'm not thinking about the greater good of my children. And I'm just a wreck, after all day at work. And so we said, you know what we're really after is the person as a whole, not just the person who walks through the doors of their business. And so let's really frame this model up for how this can work out for families as well. And it just, took off. And it's been so fun to see families transformed and how that looks, for them as they frame up their family's purpose, they frame up their family's values, what their vision is, what they want to create within their family. They get their kids involved in that, the spouses, everybody locks down on what the preferred behaviors and values of the family are, what the norms are when they're getting together, in meetings and over the dinner table and all that kind of stuff. And it's just been really fun to see what's happened with that. Even had one family I worked with, their daughters were in grade school, and they started the mom and the daughters started a publishing company, and they're writing and producing children's books
That's fantastic.
out of the family
Wow.
portrait experience. It's just really, really neat.
That's very cool. All right, moving kind of, let's flip a little bit to more current times. 2020 brought with it all kinds of crazy to the business world, to family, to the way we in America and around the world do business and really interact with each other. Because in most states in America, there was some level of stay away from people, either a mandate or a suggestion or whatever you want to call it. In this, the servant leadership model, how do you see that affecting businesses as they grow, as they either continue or not continue? From your perspective, what has 2020 done to business and especially to the servant leader model?
Yeah, it hasn't changed the model, but what it does is it accents some things that you might have to do differently. So, one of the key aspects of servant leadership is being present and approachable as a leader, right? As being out in the mix. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
where people can truly learn who you are and understand who you are. I mean, I talk about building personal character as a leader. Well, you can't do that from afar. So social distancing really created challenges for that, right? And so leaders that ran manufacturing organizations used to, as servant leaders, they're out on the floor, plant floor, talking to people,
Yeah.
interacting. How's it going with the family? What's your biggest challenge of the day? That type of thing. And all of a sudden with COVID, they could no longer do that. They had to, I mean, 6 feet apart,
Mm-hmm.
you have to back, all those types of things. So they had to really get creative on how you go about keeping that personal relationship, presence, approachability, aspect of their leadership. And it was so neat to see a lot of the leaders that I work with on their creativity. One organization, they had one day where they basically had a deal where they shared everybody's offices from home and what that looked like. And there was some that had set up office in the restroom. There were some in their kids' bedrooms, and it was just, and they got such a, it was such a neat way to, really bring the team together, even in times where you couldn't be together.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a big thing. And the other thing I would tell you, Craig, is it was more important than ever for leaders to show empathy for what their team members were going through.
Right.
Because whether it's kids that aren't able to go to school in person and they're having to do the, work from home, or
Mm-hmm.
the schooling from home and all that, I mean, all of a sudden the stress level of their teams were just going up and up and up. And so leaders really had to, to be empathetic and more caring than ever to what people needed, to really serve their particular needs at the time. So flexibility was important, all those types of things. At the end of the day, what I would tell you is, and this is in my coaching world, a lot of the questions that I'm asking now is, coming out of last year, what are your learnings?
Right.
What are your big key takeaways from, the last year? And it's a lot of really positive things. I mean, some things like, we found out that we could do things we never thought we could do in a much quicker fashion than we ever had to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really enabled teams, from a performance standpoint, from a connection standpoint, and all those things, coming out of that. So to be from a positive aspect.
Did, talking about the work from home idea and having to switch, really kind of rethink some of these business models. What is working from home gonna do to the American workforce? Is this a lasting, and good or bad, I don't know, but is this something that we're gonna have for a while? The idea that as long as you should be working from home, and does that really affect business at a deeper level long term?
Yeah, I believe it does. And I hope that it isn't a permanent thing myself, because one of the key aspects of servant leadership is to build relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a fact of the matter that it's harder to build relationships via Zoom, via, this over the phone, whatever it is, than it is day to day, face to face interaction and so forth, the social nature of that. So, my personal feeling is that we will gradually get back to normal, and businesses and organizations will want it to be. I will tell you, the lion's share of my clients really tried to keep things absolutely normal, and they kept everybody in their offices whether they're wearing masks, whether they're staying more social distance,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. People still really came into the office for the most part. I had a few that didn't, but those are all, now that they're migrating back, it's like, holy cow, the energy level of the team just rises. They see it rise just in a great way. And so they see the positive aspect of being face to face, interacting on a consistent basis. So, but on that being said, there's certainly some convenience aspect that I think businesses,
Yeah.
from the standpoint of, there's no doubt they will capitalize on, keeping some overhead costs down from office space and that type of thing, where it does make some sense to just work from home. I think we've learned some things that we can do it. And so where it makes sense, for sure, but I don't know that there will ever be a substitute for that interaction. Again, you think about Jesus looking at that model, he got up close and personal to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
even people, with leprosy, people, you name it. He wasn't staying back from a distance. He was getting up close.
Right.
And so that's really what it takes to be an effective leader.
A little more broad thought process. These uh, lockdowns, the response to the pandemic in America. Um, there are huge percentages of businesses that will not come back at this point. Just this morning there was a note locally on our local movie theater's Facebook page where they said this weekend, after this weekend, we're going to be closing. And the question is, well, is that always? Is it just temporary? And the answer is indefinite because there's just not enough business to justify staying running. And that's a bummer because we are, it's a little tiny theater in a small town, but it services a huge area of people. But the pandemic response has really changed society's mind about going out and being in a room with that. Do you see that having much greater consequences, negative consequences, going forward to society in general, these lockdowns?
That there's every possibility for that to be the case, Craig. I mean, I just feel so horrible for the hospitality industry and entertainment industry. I mean, what you mentioned, I mean, movie theaters and
Mm-hmm.
so forth, and restaurants. I mean, you think about that, and it's just, I mean, totally outside of their control. They got their organization shut down. So I guess I'm very hopeful, and I still hold out hope that it will come around and we'll be back to some semblance of order and normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's my hope. I would tell you from a work opportunity standpoint, there's as many organizations that have benefited from the COVID that there is, that have gone down. So just in our community, I'm from Alexandria, Minnesota. We have a heavy, intensive aspect of manufacturing, and in particularly packaging industry,
Mm.
manufacturing, food packaging.
Mm-hmm.
They can't find enough help,
Really?
right? I mean, we have way more jobs in our community than we have people, because we have one organization that is making equipment for COVID testing, and they've been asked to increase their output by 10 times what they normally did. Well, holy cow! All of a sudden they need hundreds more people and all that kind of stuff. And so there's definitely places for if you're willing to be flexible to kind of equip yourself
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint of what you like to do. I think there's going to be plenty of work to be done, but I also believe that at the end of the day, people still, they love to go out to eat, they love to go for entertainment, and that type thing. And I just believe that we will get back to that. And to your point, it's very variable all over the country. I mean, there's places. My son and daughter-in-law just got back from Florida, and they said they didn't even recognize anything was different. All restaurants are wide
Mm-hmm.
open. Everything's going great guns, and people are just enjoying things like nothing was any different.
Yeah.
So I do think that we'll get back to some semblance of order there, and that's my hope and prayer. What I do know is that God is still on the throne. Jesus is still in charge, and he will carry the day, and the battle is his, and I rest comfortably every day knowing that.
Excellent. Um, the thinking of business in small town specifically, how important is a main street in quotes? That main street business climate to keeping a community viable and vibrant.
I think it's absolutely huge. I mean, Alexandria had one of our main historic buildings in the last year burned down.
Mm.
And there was 3 or 4 of our local businesses that lost their buildings, and it just creates it was right on our main street, and it creates such a hole. I mean, and it's a hurt, it's a pain, and so forth, for not just those people but the entire community.
Yeah.
Because your main street is the soul, right? The soul of your community. It's the vibrancy, it's where everybody does get together, and that type thing. So communities like Millbank, like Alexandria, like these smaller, little more rural communities, it is absolutely critical. And that's why I've seen, I mean, the business community that I talk about that's so vibrant here in Alexandria,
Mm-hmm.
just 2 weeks ago, they just raised $42,000 to give to all of the laid off restaurant workers in town.
Wow.
through gift cards
Mm-hmm.
to food to restaurants, through all kinds of stuff. They just said, you know what, we're going to support these people because we do not want to lose them. We want them right where they were, when this comes back. And so there's all kinds of that activity going on. And that's where when I see, so many leaders that have a heart for servant leadership, and that's what happens is not only do they not think about, they think about the greater good of their team, but also their community.
Yeah.
And how can we lift up our community, and what can that look like? And that happened within 1 week. That was an idea of one individual who said, you know what? I was just talking to a restaurant owner, and he was worried that his people that he's had to lay off were not even going to have a Christmas dinner.
Wow.
And we said, you know what? That's unacceptable. And we spread the word, had $42,000, went to, local restaurants, bought their gift cards. So we supported them with that money,
Mm-hmm.
gave it to the people. I mean, just all kinds of examples of how we used that. And we basically gave them 2 boxes of food, gift cards, and a letter saying, we just so appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing. And hand delivered them. It was to 500 people.
That's fantastic. Where can people find your specific information and follow you? Are you out there on the social medias as your leadership coaching, or what's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, the best place, Craig, is triuneleadershipservices.com. That has all my contact information on it. That has my Facebook page on it, my LinkedIn page, and that type thing. But that's the best spot, and that's really, you can gain an understanding of the services that that I provide and work with people on to really help them become that leader that I believe they were born to be.
Hmm.
And it's just really fun. But that is the best central spot to
Okay.
find that.
Perfect. Before I let you go, so you can catch your your car to your flight. Tell me about maple syrup.
Now you're talking about my passions.
Nice.
So I do have a hobby. I'm a firm believer that as a servant leader, you need to take care of yourself. Extreme self-care is a big time part of servant leadership because
Mm-hmm.
as servant leaders, we are always thinking about the greater good of others. Well, what do we shortchange ourselves? And if we're doing that, then we're not being the best for those people that we serve. So I'm a huge advocate of extreme self-care, body, mind, and spirit, those 3 things. Well, part of that is having things that you enjoy to do on the side, hobbies and things like that. And one of my hobbies is to produce maple syrup. Every year in the spring, I tap about 110 trees
Wow.
and end up producing about 30 gallons of pure maple syrup that have the opportunity to, again, share with people because, and that's a healthy alternative to sugar, which again goes to the extreme self-care.
Yeah.
It's just an absolute creation from God. And it's just really, really a fun activity to do with your friends, your family, your grandchildren. After the winter, to get out in the woods and bang around the woods, and then throw that sap on an open fire and smell that maple syrup smell coming up as it's boiling. Just really a lot of fun.
So, do you just wander about the public woods to find these trees, or do you have land?
No, I have 75 acres of
Okay.
woods right here on the edge of town, and and have a sugar shack, right there that where we boil it all down and then filter it and bottle it. And it's by no means a huge business. It's more of a fun hobby and so forth and that type thing. But it's definitely a lot of work, but it's fun work. It's a labor of love. It's just an absolute blast to do and to share with people, not only in the consuming of the syrup, but in the production of it too. It's just really sitting around the fire playing cribbage with a good friend and or your sons. There's nothing better than that.
It's like moonshine of the north.
Yeah, that's right. Maple syrup. That's right.
Nice.
That's what you might think when somebody passes by and sees the steam
Right.
wafting out of the out of the barn.
What are they making over there?
Yeah.
Can people buy it from you, or is it all spoken for? How do you do that? Is that something that's
So
available?
locals, I don't ship it is the main thing, but locals, I have a lot of people that every year they just wait. They can't wait for the new batch to come out, and then they do buy it. Yes. So again, if you are fairly local or in the area anytime, you can just touch base with me, and I can get you hooked up with some pure maple syrup for sure.
How long have you been doing this?
This will be my 8th season this upcoming year. I've done it 7 years, and so it's the 8th season of being a farmer.
Over the 8 years, this fascinates me a little bit. Does the consistency, the amount you get, and the flavor, does that change year over year? Or is it pretty consistent?
Yeah, I have not found the flavor to really change much at all. It can, I mean, the amount of sweetness in it can alter. They say the sugar content can vary a little bit from year to year. What varies, Craig, is the amount of output because you're totally dependent on the weather. And so I've had years as low as where I've only produced about 10 gallons of syrup up to years, normal years between 25 and 30.
What does it
And
take
that's,
raw
yeah.
sap to get a gallon? How much? What's the ratio?
So 40 gallons of sap gives you 1 gallon of syrup.
Wow.
So it's a lot of boiling down. And what happens is the sap only runs on days that it gets up above 32 degrees during the day and then goes back down below 32 at night. So however long of a time in the springtime that you have where your temperature is varying above 32 and back below 32, that's the only days that it runs.
So it has to drop back down every night.
Yeah, because what that's telling the tree then, well, it's not yet spring, so the sap's going back down into the ground. And so it's making it go back up. When it gets above 32, I think it's spring. We need to start heading up the tree and then down if it doesn't. So that's really what happens, in that process. And so if you get, 6, 7, 8 days of that, you'll have, a very short season. If you get 3 weeks of that, you have a more normal, longer season.
Wow. I'll have to come up and check out that operation. That'd be really fun. Just to see what you're doing there.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's bringing school kids out and all that kind of stuff to just see, because it truly is. It's God's creation. You just look at this sap coming out of the tree. You throw it on an open fire, boiling, and so forth. You boil it down, 40 gallons down to 1. And the next thing you know, you've got syrup, and it's a fascinating thing. You don't add one thing, not one. All you do is boil down, and it's incredible.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, who knew? Leadership coach and maple syrup cooker. Well, Mark, I appreciate your time so much. I don't want to keep you any longer. You need to get on the road, but have a safe journey down to the warm land, whatever. So let's do this again as we get farther into this year. I'd love to have you back on, and let's talk about where things are, and as we're coming out of into 21, what that's looking like business wise and just as a society. I'd love to get your take on that as we get farther into the new year.
Absolutely, Craig. I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been to be a guest on your great show, and thanks for all you do, for the impact that you have on the local community there. I know you're just a huge, huge supporter of Millbank and all that you're doing there, and just really lift you up for your great work and what you're doing. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. It's fun. We like it. It's a fun little place to live, and I love the fact that in 2021 we can connect with people from around the world and have these conversations, and we don't have to travel to do that. And so we can enjoy the free speech that we have from anywhere. And I love that. So
right on.
Thanks for being a part of this. And we will see you on the next one. Have a safe journey. And
thanks, Craig.
Say hello to your wife for us, and we'll talk next
You do
time.
the same, as well as all your beautiful children.
Absolutely, we'll do it. Thank you so much for coming on. Have a great day. Mark Deterding, TriuneLeadershipServices.com is the website. Check him out. This is whymillbank.com. This is the interview podcast. If you have any questions or comments, whymillbank@gmail.com is the email address. We'd love to hear from you. As always, stay healthy, check on your neighbors, and come back for the next one. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening. See you later.